All right, today we're talking about strength training, but not just the Instagram version with, trendy workouts and all the fitness gimmicks that are out there. We're going to talk about the real science of getting stronger, building muscle, and of course, looking like you actually train too. My guest today is Austin Current. He's a coach, an educator, and the author of The Science of Strength Training, which I don't recommend a lot of fitness books out there. Honestly, most of them are kind of garbage, but this is a great book, and I'm excited to get into this conversation with you today. So thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, thanks for reaching out. Your message really made me laugh. Of just like, hey, I've wanted to do this, forgot to reach out, been meaning to reach out, and it's such a representation of life today. I feel like where we have all this intention and there's so many things pulling at us and there's so much going on that sometimes we lose sight of so many great things we want to do, and it happens to me all the time. So no, I'm happy to be here, man, and I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, I bought your book as soon as it came out and read it like straight through. It was just a great resource. And like I said, there's so few books out there in the space that are just really not only evidence-based, but just practical and free from all the nonsense. So it was refreshing to read. When we moved into the RV, it didn't make the cut, unfortunately. So I wasn't able to like go back and reread it to refresh my memory on everything. But it's we have an Amazon store where we have recommended books, and it's been in there since the get-go. So
I appreciate
true
that.
fanboy over here. So one thing I
Awesome.
like about your book is it just does a really good job of simplifying kind of the why behind good training, why it works. If you think about the way people think about training these days, what's something that's kind of overlooked from exercise science that you think would be really practical to just the everyday lifter trying to get in shape?
Yeah, so I think I gave this question some thought, and I think about these things quite a bit, and trying to I think we share similar clientele bases and stuff where it's just kind of the everyday gym goer. And I think the concept of load management, fatigue management comes to mind initially when you ask that question. And that's when we, kind of in plain English, that's when we look at like perceived effort and perceived exertion, which is a subjective measure by nature. And that also correlates or can be compared to like the amount of reps you have in reserve at the end of any given set, let's say. In that subject matter, like fatigue management, load management does span several things. But I think the most helpful thing to consider and think about for the everyday gym goer really is how hard are we working? And are we working, again, because there's kind of this Goldilocks zone, like with all things, right? Especially when we look at stress, there seems to be this Goldilocks zone of we need enough of it, but not too much of it. And we need it to be recoverable. We need it to be managed well and manageable, and something that we can actively engage with without it being overstimulating and us disengaging from it. And so that would be my kind of concrete answer there. And I think learning how to push yourself far enough but not too far in each workout is a really good skill to hone in on.
Yeah, that hits home because if I think about, somebody who comes to work with us that has a lot of experience with exercise or even training in the past, like maybe specifically somebody who has done group classes, whether it's CrossFit or Orange Theory or whatever, I'd say the biggest thing that we can open their eyes to is really that concept of how close to failure are you working, because I feel like that's probably the place where most people leave a lot of progress on the table. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's those people who just go RPE 10 100% of the time. I think those people are rare, but I think you're right. I mean, truly educating somebody about load management, proximity to failure, is just a huge. Once you wrap your brain around that, your training just becomes more enjoyable because you see better progress. You feel less beat up all the time, but you feel accomplished because you're really getting a lot of good work done.
I think it's very compared. I also, to that point, I also think it's very comparable. If listeners need a different example, I think it's easier sometimes to look at our life and the way that we live it And I think as we all listening to this likely have jobs or some type of thing that we do, we have to wake up and show up to every day and actually perform at, whether that's parenthood, et cetera, there needs to be this sense of managing that stress across the board and not, knowing how to pull back, knowing how to push when those things are necessary. And it is this intimate dance and this intimate balance that we have to create. And I see it more as a dance than I see anything. And again, sometimes we feel more coordinated, sometimes we dance well, sometimes we don't. But at the end of the day, it's the effort and the intention of trying to learn how to dance better, more effectively, more efficiently, as best we can, and understanding that sometimes we'll fall short of our expectations and sometimes we'll meet them. And learning how to also balance and dance with that reality is also very, very helpful. And so I think looking at training in that way too, as something that, and just general approaches to fitness and health, less about something that you're going to win at any point and more about something that you're going to be able to continue to show up and perform and practice each and every day. And I think that's also just a very valuable skill to take to life, but also to training.
It's like the old analogy, like you could never brush your teeth good enough one day to where you're never going to have to do it again. It's
perfect. Yeah.
It's a constant thing. You just have to, continue on. Like, we're in the business of helping people find whatever their forever fitness plan is, because it's something that you just can't quit one day, assuming that you want to keep the results that you've gotten up until that point.
It's the goal.
Well, and you actually brought up a lot of mindset stuff there. You hinted at it, that, kind of letting go of these perfectionist tendencies, that you feel like everything has to be amazing to be worth doing, or it has to be perfect to even try. I'm sure you've noticed that in the art of coaching, it becomes less about the squats and the deadlifts and more about what goes on in the 8 inches between the ears.
More so than anything I've ever imagined it being. My career as a, not only an online coach, and trainer, but also an in-person trainer. And, everything kind of turns into, and I don't mean this negatively, but everything kind of is a therapy session in some way, shape, or form. And really just there as we're all just trying to connect to something, and we're all trying to connect to someone, especially when we're in a more vulnerable position. And I think when people are training, and a lot of people who are newer to training are consistently in a very vulnerable position. And, they're coming likely when they're tired. They're going to the gym likely when they're tired. They don't probably really want to be there, but they know they should. They're doing something that's very uncomfortable or makes them very uncomfortable. And they're maybe not very confident that they're doing it correctly the whole time. And just put yourself, I think, to have empathy is important as a trainer and a coach, and just as a friend and just as a human being. But to be able to put yourself in their shoes repeatedly, I think is invaluable, because again, like I don't really remember what it was like or what it feels like to walk into a gym and to really be nervous, like a full body anxiety to be there.
Yeah.
But I've walked into other spaces where I felt that, and I know how uncomfortable that is. And I know that if I could find someone who has empathy and compassion and knowledge of how to do that thing, and they were willing to kind of hold my hand through it and guide me through it and just say, hey, like, I get it. Here's the important stuff. I'm going to take you under my wing and do that with you. Again, like, that's what a coach is, right? And that's, I think, what we're all searching for in some way, shape, or form. And it's nice to have that there as a person who's doing something vulnerable.
Yep. And if you can do that for somebody, you've number one, you've got a client for life, and you've just changed that person in a fundamental way, and they usually end up spilling that over onto somebody else in their life too, which is just incredible when we hear those stories. Well, all right, so a lot of people still don't really understand what strength training is. They think it's those guys in the corner of the gym who are screaming and just have multiple 45-pound plates loaded on the bar. Those people are strength training, whatever that is. I'm not interested in doing it. But What does real strength training actually mean to the average parent, busy adult person, of our age group that just is looking to get in shape? What does strength training really mean?
Yeah, and I think it helps to change the vocabulary there a bit. So, I think using the term resistance training, I think, is helpful in that context. And how the research puts it is progressive resistance training. And so I think that's just a better lens to look through it at. And, when we hear strength training, we do correlate that with building massive amounts of strength. And we think maybe power lifters, we think of strength athletes, maybe strong men or bodybuilders, or, whatever you kind of think about when you think of strength training. And, a lot of us have Arnold in the back of our mind because it's just been put in front of our faces so much that Arnold is this thing that embodies this other thing, and or like defines that thing. And I think thinking in terms of resistance training is helpful because at the end of the day, it's all we're doing with that. Everything in that gym is a tool to place resistance on the body. It's the only reason it's there. It's the only reason that gym owner would have spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to put it in that gym. They don't just, again, I think, again, it's helpful to have the understanding of gyms in general, which is, just looking at that full dumbbell rack, that was tens of thousands of dollars. And we didn't put that here. We didn't go into debt to put that here because they're useless or because they're X, Y, and Z. Like it's just a tool, right? Same with all the machines and everything else. They're all just tools to place resistance on the body. And when we place resistance, when we place that stress on the body, our body adapts in a positive way. And it's a very controlled environment to place that stress on our body. And it seems very safe relative to all other activities. It's extremely safe to do. There's quite a low prevalence of injury. There's not no injury, but there's a lower prevalence of injury there. And again, it's safe, it's controlled, it's measured, and it's an environment where you can go place this resistance and stress on your tissues and see these positive adaptations. And so that, fundamentally, that's what strength training is. That's what resistance training is. And overall, we just need to work to find an entry point that works for us and then learn how to progressively overload that resistance training. And fundamentally, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you give a quick definition for somebody who's new to all this and has never listened to one single episode of our podcast about what that progressive overload means?
So progressive overload, fundamentally is, if we think about, again, resistance training as a stressor to the body, again, not all stress is bad stress. Some stress is good. I always think of an example. I always laugh at my grandfather's expression or examples of what he thinks exercise is in general. And I asked him to go on a walk once, and his only response was, "I only have so many heartbeats. Why waste them?" And that's just fundamentally not how that works at all. And so if you think about the opposite of that, that's how exercise works. And that's how stress works. And when we pause, again, when we find that Goldilocks zone of stress, again, enough adequate amount of it, where we go over that threshold of where we require adaptation, but not too much of it where we can move backwards or harm ourselves. Within that Goldilocks zone of stress comes adaptation overall. And that's why we're engaging with this resistance training, because we need that from a muscular and skeletal perspective, among all other systems in the body that respond positively to it as well. And with that stress, as like with anything else, we start to adapt to it in a positive way, but we start to adapt to it and we get more resilient to that stress. And to become more and more and more resilient, to say differently, to get stronger, to get more muscular, to get more fit, we have to progressively extend or progressively improve or increase that stress that we're placing on our body. And that in and of itself is progressive overload. And I think people, often when you're first hearing about progressive overload, it's usually in the context of adding more weight to what you're doing, right? Okay, I increase the weight that I'm using for this general rep range here. And at the end of the day, fundamentally, that's a way to provide progressive overload. But at the end of the day, progressive overload really is just thinking about the stress and the stimulus that you're applying to the body. And that can come in many forms. So as long as your training is increasingly a little bit more challenging over time, however that needs to look, then you're progressively overloading. And that's the ultimate goal of it. And that's kind of how I think about it and explain it to clients.
Yeah. It's kind of like, learning to play an instrument. If you only practice the same scales for the first year of trying to learn how to play the guitar or the same chords, like, well, yes, you did get better. You learned to play those chords, but unless you start, pulling out some tablature and learning some new things, well, you have now plateaued at the level you're going to be at. You have to increase the demand so you continue to learn in that example, but the same thing in the gym. I think this ties into like one of the reasons that so many people are working out but frustrated with their progress is maybe their choice of exercise or training doesn't really take into consideration progressive overload. But at the same time, I think a lot of people expect to get the results that come from following a training program that follows progressive overload. What are, kind of hit on what does it actually take, maybe from a training and maybe a little bit of nutrition standpoint, for somebody who is expecting to see physical changes in the mirror, maybe a little bit more muscle size. Nobody's trying to get huge, but some muscle definition and that classic, like, I look like I work out look.
I thought about this, and I think, again, this is one of those things I think about a lot because I think it's something that keeps people from resistance training in the first place. And I think it's a quality of it that many people have a poor relationship with or interesting relationship with, and that ultimately is effort. And when it comes down to it, to really progress within resistance training, to progress your body, to progressively overload that stress and adaptation relationship, we just need effort. And effort goes so far. And to be able to put yourself in a position where you can place high effort on the body is really ultimately what we're trying to do in there. And I take this approach with everyone. And again, I talked about entry point earlier, but whatever your entry point is to this activity, start there. And again, that could be body weight, that could be resistance bands, that could be free weight, whatever that is for you. There's no right or wrong answer. But whatever entry point you have, you need to give it effort. And when you give that effort, you will see result and you will see adaptation. And to continue to progress that and overload that stress or stimulus or adaptation, we need to continue to give effort. And that effort will always, as we talked about at the beginning, within load management, fatigue management, as we talked about perceived exertion, this is a whole system that kind of is interrelated with one another. That will always be subjective. And no matter how you show up and feel, you can give an effort. Some days that may be less, some days that may be more, but subjectively there's effort. And it is up to you to subjectively measure what that effort was. We seem to have a good barometer and kind of intuitively know I either gave enough or I didn't. And I think that comes typically in the form of guilt that we feel towards it, or shame that we feel towards it. And, at the end of the day, and again, like there's some, if you're a perfectionist or you never quite feel like you did enough, there's that in there too that you have to form a better relationship with. But we usually know, okay, I either gave a good effort. I gave a high effort. I did. Okay, great. Then you did what you needed to do. Or you're like, nah, if I'm being honest, no, I didn't. And I think that in and of itself, that quality effort really can dictate the difference of you progressing and building muscle and strength. in a noticeable way, visible way. And now it just, when we get into the conversation of like quote unquote too much, that becomes a volume thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that thing are you continuously showing up and doing?
Yeah.
And I don't think that, and there's also a genetic component to this.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, the effort you give will produce the result that you get. And I think we need to form a different relationship, or start to work on that relationship again with this song and dance of, well, the result I got is probably really rooted in the effort that I gave. And if I want more of that result, I need to give a little bit more effort. If I want a little bit less of that result, I need to probably give a little bit less effort or volume to that thing,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of work we're doing towards that thing. And so it's really up to you how that looks. But I think the amount of effort and the amount of work you need to do to achieve the thing that you're very fearful of achieving is a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to reverse that, to just do less of it. And as many of us know, as we've tried to spend our entire, like I've spent 20 years trying to build and build and build. And I'm telling you, it takes a lot more effort than you think. And it can go away really easily. And so if you get to that point where like, now it's too much, well, all you need to do is kind of turn down the dial. And I promise you, it'll start to go away. Some of that you gained will start going away. So
Right.
We can hit the rewind button on that a little bit easier than we think we can. It's not going to be there forever.
Yeah, for people who are concerned about, getting too jacked and too muscular, it's not like this. You don't wake up one morning and lift your shirt and be like, oh man, I did too much yesterday. I've just gotten to the point where I'm just too big.
Yeah, this isn't Spider-Man. You don't get bit by a spider and then you have an 8-pack and a full beard. It's not how that works.
But I think, like, going back to what you started the answer to that question off with, I think I made like a little Instagram post about this one day that, effort really is truly the most underrated training variable. You can continue to look for tweaks to your program or jump ship to try something new because you think what you're doing is not working, but you would be shocked, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this since we sell programs and coaching, but you'd be shocked at how well a suboptimal training program can work with a really high level of effort, consistency, intensity brought to it. It truly is. And that's in a gym, it's really easy to gauge somebody's intensity, making sure they're putting enough effort in, from the coach's role. And I think that's one of the downfalls of online coaching is like coaches that don't really ever check to see if their clients are putting in the right amount of effort. The opportunity is there, but it's, I think, easier with the low barrier to entry to online coaching just to send somebody a program, send them a PDF, never see, how hard they're pushing. And I think that's doing a disservice to clients. Anyway, maybe a little soapbox on that one. But all right, let's change gears a little bit and talk about some nonsense that's out there. I think my algorithm, like on my personal social media and the digital barbell social media, is pretty attuned to like what we want to see. So I don't see a lot of nonsense out there, but I know it is out there, especially with different things you need to be doing in your training. Have you seen anything out there recently that you just wish would go away?
Honestly, I'm very similar to you in that thankfully I've curated things that I don't see a ton of this nonsense. I am aware that it's out there. But when I, initially, like what comes to mind when you ask this is anything that isn't engaging with the thing that you're trying to get better at with high effort is likely a distraction in and of itself. So I think, again, taking that kind of fundamental approach of, hey, if it doesn't involve me just engaging with the thing I'm trying to improve upon and work hard there, it's probably not worth doing. And I need to just do the things that I know are going to yield the result more and with higher quality. And if it seems like new and novel, it seems that like, oh, I've never heard of this. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Try this new thing. Like there's probably a reason you've never heard of it. There's not breaking news in the world of strength, like resistance training. There's just
Right.
that we've established what seems to be a fundamental principle of it. We're still trying to work out some of the kinks. We're still trying to figure out how things really work. We kind of have an idea. We have some theories. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals really don't change as far as applying stress to the body. We need to apply a specific stress to the body to get a specific adaptation. And these specific stressors that we've identified as being productive, i.e. endurance training, cardiovascular training, strength training, or resistance training in that regard, those seem to be good. Okay.
Right.
Well, unless I'm actively engaged and or, paying high quality nutrition, go down the line there. These are the fundamentals that seem to do well for us as human beings. And so, well, if it's not about just doing that better with higher quality, with good fundamentals that have some logical reasoning to them and or scientific backing, which kind of goes down that logical reasoning route because that's the scientific method, then it's probably a distraction in and of itself. So I think that's, there's not specifics that I have seen. If you've seen any, you can call them out. We can talk about them. But as far as like, if it's distracting you, if it feels like something that's breaking news, new and novel,
Yeah.
coming out of left field, it probably is coming out of left field. And it probably is not going to stick around very long. And or it's probably someone, this is what I do see a lot. It's probably someone taking something very simple and trying to make it sound more complex than it needs to. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the hallmark of a grifter and someone that is just trying to extract money and or status from selling you something.
Yeah.
And if you run into that, if it seems like this seems like kind of like that thing, but they're making it sound really okay, like they're really taking it deep. They're trying to make it. They're making it sound complicated, but they got the answer. I mean, that's the definition of a grifter. So, I mean, as communicators and as trainers, we're constantly and consistently trying to do the exact opposite of that. We're trying to take these complex things and trying to make them sound more approachable and simple and achievable. And so, if someone's doing the opposite of that, run. Just run.
Yeah. I think the biggest example, and you see some of this stuff play out in the gym. Like we've just in the last year started going to commercial gyms because we always had our own home gym up until then. And you start seeing, like if I do see something pop up on social media or on Jeff Nipper's YouTube channel or something, and I'm not calling him a grifter, but you start to see some of those things happening in the gym. You can see the influence of it. And it's refreshing when you see people doing productive things that they've been influenced by. But, when I see somebody walking backwards on a treadmill at a 10% incline, swinging dumbbells over their head simultaneously, I know they saw some influencer doing that. Probably the biggest thing that comes to mind right now, and maybe you don't agree with this, but it's just the overimportance being put on women, especially perimenopausal women, walking with these 8-pound vests, to walk the dog and whatever. I don't know what else they're doing, but I get a little tweaked by that because I'd rather them spend that 30 minutes under a barbell or with some dumbbells versus just sauntering with an 8-pound vest on.
Yeah. And, I was interviewed by several outlets, media outlets, Washington Post, et cetera, about weighted vests. And I have a fairly neutral view on them. And I 100% agree with you. And also, if that is going to be the hill that you die on as a person of like, I can't go a day without wearing my weighted vest, then have at it. Like, seriously, enjoy it. Enjoy your walk. I'm glad you're outside. I'm glad you're getting sunlight. I'm glad you're getting movement and activity. You're spending quality time with your dog. And I hope you're also adding some progressive resistance training to that.
Right.
But if that's all you're doing, well, then that's better than you not doing that thing. Like if that's the motivation you need to get outside, I'm a fan. And just know that that's not the end in and of itself. That's not the end of what you need to be doing. that's just the beginning of what you need to start doing. And so I like the identifier of, hey, what I do like about weighted vests is it does have this correlative to, I need to add resistance to my body to adapt to something. And so I like that has a relationship. It seems like this bi-directional relationship with one another, which is load and effort and movement. And that is a great starting place for anyone to use as an entry point to progressive resistance training and actually getting, their hands on a barbell, whether you're under it or on top of it or whatever you're doing with it. Just have your hands on it, or any free weight or whatever resistance you're applying, and progressively overload that, as we talked about in the beginning. But yeah,
it's something to do, but not everything to do.
Yes, it's something to do. It's a good entry point, but it's not everything, and it's not the end in and of itself. And I have there's women, I know which women follow which women on the internet in my neighborhood, down to the type of weighted vest they have.
Oh yeah.
And like the way it looks and the way it like I know which ones. I'm like, okay, you follow this person, I bet you follow this person. And again, like, I'm just a fan that they're out there.
Right.
But it is kind of always, as a coach, as a trainer, as we do engage with this stuff a lot more than the average person does, we can kind of see through that noise. And there is, a little giggle that happens where it's like, oh, yeah, all right, I know they got the bug. They caught the bug there, or they got into that affiliate deal there.
Right.
But again, like, they're out and they're moving. I'm happy about that.
Hopefully they're walking to the gym with their weighted vest on.
Yeah. That's best case scenario. Yeah.
I don't know if you can bring the dog in, but so from what I know, you used to be competitive in bodybuilding. That's true, right? All right. And,
Yeah.
I think you've left that in the past. I think I saw on your Instagram now you actually have gotten more into some endurance stuff, and we can talk about that. But we don't coach people that are trying to get on stage or want to get that super lean, or even necessarily build that amount of muscle. They just want to be strong, be lean, not hurt. And you brought up about volume being kind of one of the things that dictates results along with intensity. How much, just for somebody who's in average shape and is really starting to take this more seriously, what do you think about as far as training volume, frequency? Where should somebody start?
So generally, we see I think we need to separate this into, and I think this is kind of what the industry does get a little bit lost with in communicating this stuff. We have an industry full of communicators, which is fantastic. It's getting more science out there to the average gym goer. But I think a lot gets lost in translation. And, as you mentioned, Jeff Nippard earlier, and those that kind of go along with Jeff on the internet, I like Jeff. I respect Jeff a lot. And he seems like a great dude. And he's done a lot for the industry, which is great. But as far as like translators and communicators go of this information, we've really, strength training really came into the cultural zeitgeist because of bodybuilding and strongman and strength training, even like dating back to Eugene Sandow back in the 19th century, early 19th century. So, he was a strongman. He was a bodybuilder, a strongman. He would challenge people to these strength events and lifting things up over his head and, travel around and do this. This is what he did. And, with Arthur Saxon and all these other guys who kind of came up in that era and really involved, kind of got this idea of strength out there and bodybuilding out there. And that followed to the golden era days of Lou Ferrigno and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all of that, which we, are more household names in our common vocabulary in our society. So as far as that goes, I think the floor that people kind of account to, well, I got to at least do that. That's what people do in there. I think is very overhyped. I think it's very misunderstood. And I think, so we have two separate outcomes that we're looking for. for the average gym goer, it's typically biased towards a health outcome. Like, I want to be more fit. I want to be more capable in my life. I just want to not hurt. I want to be healthy. And I want some strength and I want some muscle from that because I know it's healthy, versus performance-based goals, which are significantly more than that. So, the same with like the endurance world or whatever. There's a big difference of, I want to be able to go out and run a mile, go out and run a 5K and feel good and not feel like I'm dying during that, is a different goal than I want to win a marathon. Very different goals. Very different goals. And they're going to take very different efforts and planning and dedication and all of it. So if we kind of retract back to the health outcome, I think that's what most people are interested in, because encapsulated in that health outcome is gaining some strength, gaining some muscle, bone mineral density, all of these things, all the cognitive benefits, all of the things that come along with it fall within that health category of this pursuit. And so all that to set up and say, generally from a volume perspective, at this point seems like anywhere from 4 to 8 sets per week per muscle group seems to be a really good volume threshold for people. And 4 sets, for those listening, like 4 sets a week, let's say if you're doing a chest press, let's say you're training twice per week, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You do 2 sets of a chest press on Tuesday, 2 sets of a chest press on Thursday. There's your 4 sets in the week. Okay, so it's not a ton, not a lot. And if we're doing those sets with a high enough effort, which means the reps are probably starting to slow down a little bit by the time we're done with that set, that's a high effort, then that's really what seems to be beneficial. And the game there that we're playing is, can we consistently show up and do this over weeks and months and years at a time? Because that's really where the benefit lies. And can we increasingly improve our effort, improve the quality of that work, improve our effort at that work over time without needing to reinvent the wheel? And that's really all that seems required for these
Especially
adaptations
started,
to happen. Yeah, especially getting started. And obviously, you can turn that dial up. In the more advanced exercise science world, there was that 52 set study that came out, that made a lot of uproar in the exercise science community this past year. And so, we're talking about 4 sets a week. So the 52 set study was 52 sets in a week, right? So that is considerably, that's considerably more. But again, like people tolerated it. People seemed to do fine with it. There wasn't a ton of dropouts. I mean, looking through the people who got injured or dropped out of the study, there were people that happened to, but it didn't seem that drastic. And so the reason I bring that up is, like, you can take this a lot of different places with a lot of different efforts and volumes, but and humans are not fragile beings. Like, we are not we're not made of glass. Like, we can withstand the effort and the intensity and the application of that stress. We just have to warm up to it. We have to ease into it. We have to progress into it. And so all that to say, you can do the bare minimum of, let's say 4 sets a week or 52. It's really up to you on what you do there, but understand that benefits really start to happen probably around that 4 to 6 sets a week, 4 to 8 sets a week, given your effort, given your experience level, given all these different factors. But that's, as far as volume goes, that's probably that. And then frequency, just to touch on that really quick, frequency probably, we have some research that would suggest that 60 minutes a week lowers all-cause mortality by around 30%. And so 60 minutes a week, that's 2 workouts of 30 minutes. That kind of covers that. Let's say, kind of keeping that Tuesday, Thursday example. Doesn't have to be Tuesday, Thursday, but 2 days a week. And that seems to be, again, the kind of the minimum threshold that we see a significant benefit. So it doesn't have to be this thing that takes over your life. It just needs to be something that you actually start doing in your life.
Yeah. I think that should be really encouraging for somebody who's been afraid to take the first step. like, you don't have to go in to the level that you think that Arnold was training at. Start with something, even if it's as little as 2 days per week.
Yeah.
I think,
and he would tell you that too. He would tell you that too.
Oh, especially now. Yeah.
Yeah. In his 80s, he would tell you that for sure.
Yeah. Let's get Ronnie Coleman on the phone and talk to him about volume. I would say, just for our clients, I can't think of any 2-day clients that we have right now. Even for somebody starting out, I would encourage them to try to set a goal of 3 days per week, because there's a good chance that life is going to happen somewhere in the beginning, which might push you to 2 days a week on some of those weeks. And I think you'll still be happy with the progress you make at 2 times per week versus aiming for 2 and hitting 1. You probably won't be thrilled with your progress over the first couple months if you're averaging 1 workout per week. All right, so I'm 47. I don't know if I've ever said that on this podcast, but it's true. No, I'm just kidding. I have. But how do you think that? And I've adjusted my training. Just a little background. Like, I really didn't touch a barbell until I was in my 30s, and really my first introduction to that was CrossFit in 2009. And then I got bitten by the strength training bug around 2014, maybe it was around 2013, and went down the starting strength road and built a significant amount of strength during that time, at least by relative to where my strength was starting out. And my training has changed in my 40s, and it's kind of myself and Blakely. This experience has influenced like how we program for our clients now. All that to say, it's been an evolution, and we've settled on what we feel like is a sustainable training method for ourselves and for our target demographic. But when you zoom out and just look at the bigger picture, how do you think training needs to, or does it need to change for people as they, go past their 30s and into their 40s?
I think it all depends on your entry point, truthfully. And I know I've said that several times, but that's kind of why there's a through line and a theme there for me. If you've been in this for a long time, you've been doing this for a long time, you probably, outside of things starting to pop up and needing to be adjusted, there's no law that says otherwise. We have women in their 70s and 80s setting world's powerlift records at this point. So, and who are still actively engaging with powerlifting and strength training and winning competitions. So, and I would say they've probably adjusted to the way they've trained based off of that or earlier in their life. But I think what really actually happens is we just become more efficient with the effort we're giving, that we just kind of have less what's known more colloquially in the industry as like quote unquote junk volume, right? Or just busy work. And we tend to do less of that busy work in that, I have to do this because I feel bad if I don't work. Yeah. And just get straight to the point of, no, this is what's required. I do it really well. I do it to the best of my ability. Okay, then I leave. And then I recover, and then I come back and do it again. And truthfully, I don't think there's no physical laws that say otherwise. It's really just, what amount of stress can you give your body before it breaks? Okay, probably stop short of that. And that's likely going to adjust as you get older, because our bodies become less resilient. That's just a part of aging. But it's probably higher than you think. And so, again, especially if you've been doing it and you warm up into it and you continue to push the envelope. Again, like it's crazy to watch, watch any sort of like ultra marathon, ultra endurance race documentary, looking at like Leadville 100 or any of these ultra races, or, you look at, people in their 70s and 80s winning powerlifting competitions. It's really the sky's the limit. It's really kind of what you want to give it. And again, these stories are filled with, these aren't standout outliers of society. And you can look at the interviews of them. They're normal people that some of them didn't pick it up till they were in their 50s. Yeah. So it's really not these like Olympic athletes that then just get older. It's just normal people who decided that they don't want to have limits, and they're willing to test and work hard and be uncomfortable and vulnerable to what those limits are. And sometimes they come up to the, meet those limits face to face, and sometimes they never get to because they continue to push the boundary of them. So again, it's up to you, and I think you'll know when you need to change that. You'll know when that starts to feel a little bit different than it used to. And there's always workarounds. I had, as an example, I had a client. I have a regular Tuesday afternoon client that I see in person for the past couple of years, and he's in his 50s, 60s, I think.
He looks younger than he is, maybe.
Yeah. I really don't know. I don't ask the age. Many of my clients, it's just like, yeah, you're in your 50s or 60s. I don't really know. I don't really care. And again, like there's a reason I don't care to ask. Like I don't judge you based off that. I judge you based off of what you're capable of. So as we go through the assessment, as we go through early sessions, it's like, I'm going to test what those boundaries are insofar as you're comfortable. And it doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, 50, 80, 90, 100. It really just, what are you capable of doing?
Yeah.
And he fell down the stairs, really bruised his hips and tailbone and his low back. And he was just struggling. And, he wanted to come in, and we took a couple weeks off, and he wanted to, the third week he was still not feeling great, but he wanted to come in for something. And we worked around it all. We did the things he could do, and we worked around it. We found workarounds to everything. And he was still able to place load on his body. He was able to go through that training session and be better because of it. And again, like you can always work around the things that feel like limiters. And so again, kind of to come back full circle to the beginning of that question, I just, there aren't any hard and fast laws or rules that say otherwise. And so any rules or laws that seem there for you are all made up.
Yep.
And they're either there because other people have told you they're there, or because you've made them up. So, and that goes with all of life.
Right.
And those usually come from other people's insecurities and or experiences, which are not your own.
Yeah.
Based off their own insecurities or their own failures. And the best advice we ever got, my wife and I, just as a couple, one of the earliest pieces of advice we got is don't listen to other people's advice, because it's their own, and take it with a grain of salt. Essentially, not don't listen to it, but really take it with a grain of salt, because that's their experience. Those are their failures. Those are built off their insecurities, built off probably their trauma, built off the root of whatever that cause or issue was, or limitation was, or fear was, and we think we take in so many of those on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis over a lifetime, that we start to try to make sense of them, and they become these hard and fast rules in our life for whatever reason. They become the stories that we tell ourselves, and ultimately the narratives and stories that we live out. Yeah. All that to say, like, again, all those are made up.
Yeah. It's like you don't reach an age where just like deadlifts are off the table now. At this age, you can't do deadlifts anymore.
Yeah, and there's a recent podcast with Peter Attia and a roundtable of Peter Attia and several other health professionals, and they were kind of talking in that, unfortunately speaking in that way, where it was, well, I used to be able to squat. Now, once you reach this age, you just can't, and it becomes a danger, and it becomes something. Well, if you want to walk when you're 60, don't be doing this when you're 30, and that's just the opposite of good advice. I mean, it's not sound in any type of evidence. There's no root to that. Again, those are their own limitations. Those are their own experiences. And there could be an infinite amount of confounding factors and variables why that is a story in their life, but it doesn't have to be one in yours. Mm-hmm. And again, like, you're going to find what those limitations are naturally and intuitively as you go along. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to have someone else there as a collaborator, aka a trainer or a coach, again, they're there to also be there to help you find what those are, or how to build past what those are. Mm-hmm. So again, these aren't hard and fast rules.
I always try to warn people to beware of people in their life that are constantly giving them a nocebo pill. It's like, oh man, like that squats are the worst thing you can do for your knees, or like you're going to blow out your back doing that, or like, it's just, you just have to avoid those people, because you're never going to change their mind, and they're full of terrible advice like that.
Yeah, and they probably speak like that in so many other areas of their life too,
Oh
right?
yeah.
They're the same character. I kind of think of everyone as a character in your life, right? And if we live life like a video game, everyone's are if we think of this is going a little deeper, but very quickly, it's like consciousness is the screen we're looking through, not necessarily the characters that are playing out behind that screen, right? So we're always looking through this screen, but the characters are always going to change. They're always going to run into issues. And so as we're looking through this screen and we're living out this, we're kind of noticing this life go by, there's always these characters that show up to tell you who you can't be, right? And we hear story time and time again. There's infinite amount of stories out there of people who were told that and then achieved more. There's an infinite amount of stories that have been told about people that were told they would never walk again, and then they run then they're walking again, and they run an ultra marathon, right? And it's like there's always going to be people who tell you can't do something. And again, this is a cliche, and it's a cliche for a reason. And again, those are based off their own limitations, their own experience of their own life. And that may be the case, but that should be up to you to figure that out.
Yeah.
And again, there's always going to be these characters that show up to kind of tell you that you can't, or pull you in a different direction, or that'll make you fearful towards something. And instead of taking that at face value as truth, just understand it as their experience. And you can empathize with that. You can be compassionate towards it, but that doesn't mean you have to take that on as your own. Yeah. And I think that if you can keep that distance from it, I think you're better off for it.
Yeah. The Digital Barbell Podcast with Austin and Current. Come for the strength advice, stay for the life advice. I love it.
Yeah.
Going back to like the conversation around training and age and stuff, it really, you talked about this, but it really just comes down to a balancing recovery. Like we need to make sure that the recovery is outpacing the stress that we're putting on, so we continue to get the adaptation without falling apart. What do you think? You talk about this in the book from what I remember quite a bit, but what are the kind of cornerstones of recovery that we need to be focused on regardless of age? And what are the current things out there in recovery that aren't really things at all?
Yeah, I think, well, so let's start with kind of what is recovery. And recovery is that ability to return back to the state of being able to, in context to resistance training, the ability to return back to the place of being able to do hard training again. Mm-hmm. And that is recovery. And, as we train, we break some stuff. We stress some stuff out a little bit too much, sometimes more than others. And that puts us in a slight deficit. And we need a little bit of a time period where we're not stressing that system out or body part out or whatever, and allow it to come back up to hopefully at least baseline. Yeah. And ideally, it gets a little bit further than that, and we adapt to something more resilient, stronger, more capable. And what feeds into that is good sleep. Again, these are all things you've heard. Good sleep, good nutrition, and good programming. And I think the one that gets left off a lot is good programming. And understanding that point that we started with, again, to go full circle with this conversation, load and fatigue management. And learning that skill and learning that dance of how hard but not too hard can I train. And learning what that subjective measure is for you each and every day and each and every session. If regardless of gender, but females kind of get hit with this on a monthly basis with their cycle if they have a normal cycle, and or around the menopausal transition. And that doesn't require anything extraordinary as much as it requires you to engage with that dance. And it requires you to engage with that effort subjectively that you can give. And sometimes that's lower, sometimes it's higher. Well, give what you can give. And that, as long as we have good sleep, good nutrition, you're fulfilling other parts of your health in terms of your emotional health, your social health, and everything else, you're gonna recover, right?
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is recovery. That's what feeds good recovery. And things that aren't recovery is anything that falls outside of that. Again, it's those are typically distractions, you know. And when I just want to ask, like, when you think about things that aren't recovery, what kind of comes to mind there?
Probably things like extra supplements that you need to buy for recovery. Probably a lot of soft tissue work, whether you do it to yourself or pay for somebody to do it to you. Different tools that you have to buy to make yourself recover. You know, different protocols you have to follow, or, you know, standing in grass, or, you know, whatever. Like, just go to find the Huberman podcast on recovery, and
almost
everything that's in there. And I only bring that up because, like, you know, we all have limited resources in our life, time, money, mental attention, all that kind of stuff. And if we can help somebody focus on the 20% that's responsible for 80% of the recovery, and that takes away all the stress and saves them all the time and money from the things that are the 20% that might do something, then that's a huge win. And the things that you brought up really are the bigger rocks.
Yeah, they are the bigger rocks. And again, think about these other things as the sand that fills in the gaps. And again, like, you're probably not going to notice a few grains of sand missing from a jar that's seemingly full. It's just, you know, it's already kind of full. I don't really notice a few grains of sand here and there. And so you probably won't notice and also if you need all these other tools, if you need this host of whether it's supplements or tools just to feel normal or just to feel ready again, then you need to kind of take a look at the root of that. And you need to look at your programming. You need to look at your nutrition, your sleep. You need to look at the big rocks, because if you're consistently needing something else, then you're doing too much in other areas. And so just pull back and rather than buy more, do more research on what may I be doing wrong?
Yeah.
Right. What can I improve? What can I improve the quality of?
No amount of Epsom salt or Theragun time can, you know, fix the fact that you were pulling from the ground 4 days in a row in your workout program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think also just putting yourself in, it's also like when we see other people, this is very poignant. Like, we typically poke at the things that we're most insecure about in others. So, you know, if you find yourself kind of like, let's say gossiping or kind of pointing something out about someone else, you're likely bothered by that thing or pointing it out because it's likely something that you do yourself and that you don't like about what you do. And like subconsciously, it's probably something that you're doing in your own life that you just don't like about yourself, or you're trying to actively change. And so if you come up to that, I see this in like the fitness realm all the time, as I've spent my entire teenage and adult life in gyms, and this is the only thing I've done professionally in my life, is be a trainer. And so I've been around it my whole life, essentially is what I'm trying to say. I see people do crazy stuff all the time. Every time I walk in the gym, I'm seeing someone just beat themselves to hell with a Theragun, or beat themselves to hell with a foam roller, or they're doing all this stuff. And I look at that and I'm more or less just kind of in awe of, like, what are you doing to yourself that's required? Like, truthfully, like, what type of torture are you doing to yourself? I can't wait to see your workout. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing what this massacre is, because
if that's the recovery.
If that's what you need to do to feel like you can even be in here, man, you are getting after it. You know?
Or how bad is your life outside the gym that this is a relief for you?
What demons are you dealing with, man? That you feel required that's necessary for the first 30 minutes of your day.
Just 30 minutes of IT band rolling.
Yeah, which also, if you've done that stuff, it's not comfortable.
No.
It doesn't feel good. So it's not like that's an enjoyable process. That's a, you know, like, who hurt you? And probably it's yourself. So yeah, again, always go back to, like, it's probably about what you could be doing better. and it all involves those big rocks that we talked about.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up. I got a good question for you here. I don't think I told you this one's coming, so you might need a second to think about it. But let's say I gave you the budget and a billboard to put up there in Denver that every person driving by would see. And I'm going to just put the caveat on this. It has to be something to do with fitness. What are you going to put up on that billboard for people to read?
I like to just go with what comes to mind first, because if I don't, I'll be paralyzed by.
Is it buy my book?
No. It is. Don't overthink it. Just start. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, as someone who overthinks everything, I would be 100 times further in my professional career, my physical, like everything. If I would have followed that motto throughout my entire life, don't overthink it, just start. And I've done that. Whatever success I've had in my life in general, it's because I followed that advice. Mm-hmm. Don't overthink it, just start.
I like
because
it.
It kills everything, right? It kills the fear, it kills the friction, kills the resistance, and it kills all self-doubt of, well, what if? And it's like, well, you'll find out what those are anyways. So you may as well just start.
Yeah. At least you'll start making progress too.
Right.
Well, where's the best place for people to find you online, and where's the best place for people to go and buy your book so you make the most money off of it?
Yeah. Well, so as far as following me on the internet, Instagram's always a good place that I hang out. So you can just search my name on that, Austin Current. I'm the bearded guy. My face will come up, big beard there. And then YouTube, I'm always trying to be better at YouTube. But if you want to learn how to do specific exercises, how-to tutorials are kind of my bread and butter. And so I'm attempting to trying to refilm a lot of those and get those back online. That's been my bread and butter throughout my career. So I'm starting, with this new kind of part of my career. I'm refilming a lot of those and redoing a lot of those. And so, Instagram or YouTube, you can just search my name. And then as far as, buy my book, the cheapest option and the most affordable option is going to be Amazon. It's but really it's less about me and more about who you want to support and how you want to go about buying it. So, you can buy it really anywhere. Just search the title of the book. You can buy it through, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. It doesn't really matter. Or Amazon. Amazon's going to be the best price because that's what Amazon does. But it's ultimately it's been 40 something % off in basically for 3 years now. So it's somewhere around $12 on Amazon if you're looking for a good resource.
It's a screaming deal. Yeah. Is it available like on the bookshelf in Barnes and Noble?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, you can walk into a Barnes and Noble. It'll probably be there. I mean, I've seen it. Any Barnes and Noble I see, I go in and try and find it. It's in most of them that I've been in.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, just go and try and find it in Barnes and Noble if you want kind of a day to explore. And I just love going into bookstores. So if you're like me, just like going and breathing glue and old paper and I'm a big fan of coffee, and just being around books feels good. So walk into a bookstore and go support something other than Amazon. But yeah,
we were just in a Barnes and Noble 2 days ago, and it was bumping in there. It was packed. It was so cool to see. It had been a little while. I'm like, this is awesome. And they had a Starbucks in there. We're like, we got to come in here and work sometime. This is a good vibe.
Yeah, I used to actually do that when I was in. So I started my first business when I was in college, training clients online. And Barnes and Noble, it was a 2-story Barnes and Noble, and upstairs was this huge quiet area, kind of more like a local library than it was a Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
And so I'd grab a coffee and go upstairs and take advantage of their free Wi-Fi and just be surrounded by books. It's a good environment.
For sure. Old school. I like it. Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Definitely go give Austin a follow, grab his book, and reach out to him if you need any help. So thanks for being here, man.
Thank you.